Volume seems very low. Don't know why.
We were supposed to have fixed that, but that's a good thing. Maybe it won't catch us. Welcome back to WOOK Club, where every week we break down a random Grateful Dead show. This week, January 90, The Front. What'd you think, T?
Very raw. Very, very, very raw. Like, I felt like some of the
Make it
shows,
raw.
like, I mean, I don't know. It's like, I always think of it of like, molding clay and like what comes out of it and creating it. And this one was just sort of like a lump of clay still. Like, there was no, they kind of had just put their fingers into it and started to, I don't know.
This raises a question. We'll get into the whole show in a minute, but as Antelope is an example, how much do the gadgets affect how we appreciate Antelope these days, as opposed to, like I've asked before, if you stuck a guitar, a bass, drums, and a little Casio keyboard in their hands, could they do what they do with all the gadgets and gizmos that they have?
Well, I feel like these days, because they're such good musicians, have grown into what, like A+ musicians. You could give them anything and they could make it sound good. Like back then, they were still raw. The music was still raw. The songs weren't anything yet. Like they hadn't been formed yet or like turned into anything. It was still just like, it felt very much like we're just playing these songs. You know what I mean? Like we haven't created what they're going to be. They're just sort of songs, and here they are.
It's your clay thing again.
Yeah. So it was interesting, and the recording, was a little. It was a soundboard, but it was like very janky and rough, and kind of went along with the whole feeling.
I imagine the soundboard being like a little 4-track.
Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't call it a soundboard. I'd just say it was like a board, maybe a board game or something. Like it was not. Yeah, the technology, the sound, the band, everything. But it gives it that, it's fun to do these because it gives it that rawness and that early view, and listening to some of these songs in this first sort of way.
This show happened in between my first and second shows. My first show was in December of 89. My second show was in February of 90. And this was in between. And so this is what I heard when I first went and saw them. And sometimes people are like, you weren't immediately enthralled. This is what I heard. And I was like, they're cool. There's something there. But I mean, it's janky, it's raw, and it's,
I mean, even back then, though, not having the future to look into and look back on the past like we do now, it's fun. It's like very raw. It's a rock and roll band, You're like, okay, these guys have something here that's very energetic and fun, and they're good musicians.
You see why both times they played the 8x10, they didn't let them do an encore. They were like, all right, show's over, lights on, let's get everybody out. We have 30 people here, and it's costing me more to stay open.
But in that, when you look at the set, it's a very fun 2 sets. It's a very, like you get the communication breakdown is very fun, which also speaks to that rawness of like almost like a high school band, college band, where you're doing covers, random covers of like your favorite artists and stuff. And this is one that didn't really, make the cut all the way through in the future. But, unlike Good Times, Bad Times, which sort of became
I would rather have a communications breakdown, I think.
And with no quarter these days, that kind of is taken into that effect too. But I mean,
a whole other thing though. That's like a whole different Zeppelin. That isn't bar band Zeppelin. That's
exactly. It's not young Zeppelin where you're like the high school. Right. Exactly what I was saying is like, it's all that. So it's yeah. So we can jump into it. I think.
What do we got? Carolina to open.
Yep.
And I mean, I guess. I know at least for me, I'm always like, get it out of the way. I understand why they did it. They were trying to teach themselves something, but at this point, do you really need it on the tape anymore?
Yes, I agree. Like, get it over with at the beginning of the show is the best place for it, because it's sort of that intro and okay, fun. Again, it's just something fun. I think again, like that way to open a show when you're just sort of figuring shit out and you're like, oh, let's do that to open. sure.
Right.
Like, okay, whatever. Not the, I'd rather have it there than in the middle of the set, as we say all the time. But again, you don't need it. And the fun thing about it being on the tape, though, is that it's there for posterity, and you can listen to it, and you're like, oh yeah, they did the
like the Dead and Company show tonight that we may not have a recording of.
Right, exactly. A lot of them that we don't have a recording.
Well, there's recordings, but I mean, who's going to Mixler at the private HP party?
Oh yeah, right, exactly.
All right, Bathtub Jen, very interesting because Bathtub Jen, very interesting. Page has not leaned into crazy piano guy. He lets Trey come in clean, play a couple chunky chords, and then does a little bit of funky piano. But it isn't like today where we get a nice 2 or 3 minutes of out there.
The whole thing is, again, this was the first indication of the raw clay, like the clay just being sitting on the counter and not nothing yet, right? Like it's just sort of like a song. It's not like
7.5 years before the Great Went Gin, which everyone heralds as the breakthroughs. So for some context,
the funny thing about it too is the way it ends. It just sort of like goes into this little thing, and then it's like the ending is just so. Yeah, the ending is just so weird, and Trey's just like, Bathtub Gin.
Get the merch table.
Yeah, you're like, oh, the song that there was like no elongated jam in the middle of it, none of the like taking a bath section of like, getting into it and then coming out of it and then having it.
But they didn't know. I don't think they knew then that when you have a place, even a small gymnasium with 3,000 people all singing along to it, all of a sudden that line becomes something more than it is in a bar.
Right, totally. But the end was just like it's almost like how Everything's Right evolved into the na-nas at the end of it, and like they changed that. This sort of evolved into something way different too, because this was just like Bathtub Gin and you're like, whoa, that's not even like, where did that even come from? Like, and I wonder how quick it was that they sort of were like, we don't need to do that to end this song. Let's just like,
waitress, try the
play
meal.
It out. So yeah, it was kind of funny.
Yamar, an early raw version of Yamar, but it had been kicking around for a couple years, I think, at this point, and very comfortable. I guess Mike's really hadn't written any songs at this point. Well, we maybe had Big Black Furry Creatures from Mars, and we had Mike's song, but there wasn't much in the Mike's bag at that point.
It sounded more rehearsed. Well, I'd say more rehearsed than most of the other songs in this. Like this one sounded like one they'd been playing for a few years and like could pull it out and be like, okay, we're comfortable. Right. We know where this one goes and what this one does, and it hasn't changed a lot over the years either. Like it's still raw, but it still has that Yamar, you know what I mean? It still has all of it in there. It's just this one at least had a little bit of the fingers like start, like you could sense where the beginning of this one was. It wasn't quite as raw as Jen. It kind of had you could tell it's been played. Like, okay, we've played this one in the garage a ton of times or in the barn a ton of times, and like we know the feeling of this is sort of us. Like this is sort of PHiSH.
Right. The Yamar at Mondegreen is going to be huge. It is. We're going to be loving it. I bet you we're going to get some video. We're going to film Tim singing it while it's playing.
I just saw Mike 2 nights ago at the bar at the Taper's Choice show. He showed up. Taper's Choice was phenomenal. I will say Mike is an odd individual. Like he just seems very much, pardon the pun intended here, he just seems very much a fish out of water in a lot of places. Right. You know what I mean? Like he's got his earplugs in, so he can't hear you very well anyway. And people are going up and talking to him and like wanting pictures. And he's just very much, whereas I feel like Trey is very much like engaged and like, okay, yeah, Mike's kind of like, okay. And like keeps his head buried in his phone a lot. So it's kind of like, don't bother me, like I'm kind of distracted type thing. And
when I met Mike, I walked up and handed him a sticker for Beautiful Garbage.
Nice.
And I was like, you should check out my podcast if you like punk rock, man. And he was like, thank you. And I just walked away. I was like, I don't need. I was so immersed for Taper's Choice.
Next to him at the bar, and I was just like, Mr. Gordon, can I buy you a drink? And he's like, no, I'm good. I was like, all right, cool. And then I just went back behind the merch table. Like, wanted him to know I was working there too and wasn't just this rando talking. I was like, no, I'm actually with the band hanging out working. Like, it's cool. I just wanted to make sure.
Have you ever heard of WOOK Plus?
Yeah,
We
I know
love
that.
you over on WOOK Plus.
I wish I had a sticker to give him or a T-shirt next time.
Yeah, you're gonna have
Anyway,
to keep one in your back pocket.
I
All
know.
right, back to Weekapaug. All right, Weekapaug ECDC bag. Let me ask you. I did a poll the other day, and 3/4 of the people thought that Weekapaug belonged with Susie Greenberg.
I was one
I
of those.
personally like it better with ACDC bag.
Yeah, I figured you'd say that because I like it better with the other one. I like it. Just Susie feels so natural out of it. Like even when they went into ACDC bag here, it kind of felt like
Chunky.
chunky. Yeah, chunky, and it almost felt like it should have been Susie. Like it almost felt like, oh, it should have been a Susie. Like it felt. I don't know. It's
They
also
forced themselves to do the ACDC bag to do something different.
right. It kind of felt like that, but it was yeah. I mean, the Okipaw again, sort of raw, but what it
We need that more. They do Buried Alive once or
yeah.
twice a year. Can we get an Weekapaug? What's up?
Yeah, exactly. And Brian, you nailed it with Mike. Exactly. He's more distracted and more privately contained. And I didn't want to bother him personally. Like I was watching him with other people interacting. I was like, I don't want to, like, he's not the kind of guy that's, unless Benji and I were in a conversation and with him, then I could see it, but it's not one that I want to go up and start. So just to finish that thought, but yeah, I agree. I think bag, either one of them work really well because they're really fun coming out of it because the Okipaw sets it up so well.
And the cold
right?
start.
Yeah, and it just sort of like,
Oh, I got one for you.
What?
You're gonna shoot me. How about we break in, and Weekapaug backward down the number line?
That would fit though, wouldn't it? I mean, it would really
totally fit.
It would totally fit.
Work.
It totally would.
And it would freak people out. They'd be like, Weekapaug, fuck yeah. And then they'd be like, oh, dude, you
they
didn't number line the
Okipaw. It's funny though. Right. It's such a great setup song for that, I mean, it really sets up it's like the curtain with what's going to come after, like what's it setting up, what's it putting us into. And bag totally works. And back then it totally, I mean, for what it was, bag's another one kind of like Yamar, where the foundation was there. Like it was pretty much that song. It obviously wasn't what we were getting in the New Year's show last year type bag, but it was a very fun rock and roll song.
It's an easy song too. I think it's an easy jam vehicle. It's it just goes along mid-rock tempo, and the lyric is all cliches, so it's all stuff that you connect with immediately. I'm running so fast
and easily can remember and sing. And to your point, seeing them early on, this is PHiSH. Like this is one of those PHiSH songs, right? Like this kind of defines them. Silly lyrics, rhyming a lot, not too serious, but jammy and rocky and very fun song, very flowy, very cool. And so even then it works in like this youth mode of theirs, and like it's really cool. Yeah.
Right. And then they run through a couple more with, I guess we could even say, the next three that are in the same vein. They're very fishy songs.
Yep, totally. And what we always say about My Sweet One, right? Like that quick punch of a song. Even
this week's My Sweet One brought to you courtesy of
then, like, it was just this, and it changes that tone so quickly, which is again what PHiSH is, right? It goes from like this kind of AC/DC bag rockin' silly song into this
bluegrassy country kind of
country, hoedowny, fun, silly, like My Sweet One, but moving, right? Like gets you going because you're like, woohoo, whoa, craziness.
All hopped up.
Yeah, and early in the 90s, you're like, such an interesting eclectic diversion of songs here that you're kind of like, whoa, what is this band? Again, when you look back, it's hard to look back with such hindsight of knowing this band as well as we do now and understanding what they were doing at this time and playing these. Right, exactly. So,
and then Bouncing is another one we get repeatedly. It feels like even when we get later shows, we get Bouncing. And again, it was the hit, man. That was the song that could have done to them what happened to the Spin Doctors. Thank God it didn't, but it was the song that had that potential.
I agree. And it's the poppiest of what would be their songs, and sort of that real introduction song to them for people that might not be on the fence. I feel like if you were there
always on a mixtape. Always
Right.
put that shit on a
And I
mixtape.
feel like if you were there with your girlfriend or somebody like, who like, oh, gotta come with me to check out this song, she'd be like, I like that song. Nothing
Yeah.
again, like, but out of everything you hear, that's the one that sort of makes the most sense or is like the easiest to kind of understand and groove with and be like, oh, it's not just stupid, silly, crazy fish nonsense. It's actually a put together song that I can like bounce to, and like fun.
And then they throw Heavy Metal Wilson in your face.
Right.
Let's do
And
the other side of PHiSH,
right away, like right on that other side, which is again the garage band PHiSH. Like I like to think of it as like this is us. This is our sort of our swan, our salute song, our like who we really are, and raw as shit still, but like fun, very fun, very fun.
Exactly. So Reba, interesting fact, is the newest song that they played this night. And I think that it's really a stand-up version for only being maybe 15, 20 in at this point. They really it signals to me that they have made the shift that we want to do something different. We want to go to the next level because Reba is not a bar song. Reba is a song that needs a larger venue.
Exactly, totally. And I feel like to me, Reba and Jen are so similar in songs, and like I feel like you always kind of get them together in shows a lot of times. One, not necessarily in the same set, but you do sometimes. But they go together so well. There's a bunch of songs like PHiSH does that go together, and Reba and Jen are two of those songs that go together and just feel kind of like the same ish. So to see them both turn up in this show in the first set was really interesting to me, especially this early on because it was so raw. Like we keep saying that, but it was so early. So to get both of these early versions of these songs together, kind of again, the dirt road leading towards the paved highway that you're going to get later on with PHiSH.
Right. The theaters by November 91, they made the jump. I always call the Capitol Theater run in 91 where they officially made the jump, and most places they played after that were theaters and no longer bars. They never played the Bayou again after that.
But again, Reba's lyrics compared to like Bouncing, it's a fun song, but you get lost in it. You're kind of like, what are all these, what, and the bag it,
what
tag
is going
it.
on?
Like,
what are we selling?
What
exactly?
So you're kind of like, oh, this. And then you get a Funky Bitch, which now here's where you kind of get fishy, like fun, fishy, like groovy, funky, get down, dancey PHiSH. And it was a really good version of it for being like how early it was. Like it shows you too, this song had sort of this whole
for whatever reason, Mike was attracted to it early on,
very early on. And like, it just, it's carried its weight forever. And it even sounded good. Like this one was closer, I think, to any of like sort of the later versions of things that you hear because it's a cover song and it's already rooted in here's what it is. Right. You can take and explore
it translates better for being a song at this place and the venue that they're in is it sometimes maybe does now. I don't know. People really dig the song. It's cool. It's your standard blues song, and good for Mike for stepping up and having a little Mick Jagger in him,
And to me, here's another one. Funky Bitch kind of always goes with MoMA for me. Like they're kind of the same sort of song. And I feel like you get a lot of Funky Bitches and MoMAs in the same shows because it's that same kind of tune and that same kind of song. So that goes with the Reba Bathtub Jen that I was just talking about. So and to see it stand alone here and sort of do its own thing in its early phases, you could see where it would lead to. And like I said, you could add into it, you could add on a lot to it and jam it out. But it's already got its formation down. So
and then we get the big workhorse. If you look at the set list through this time, every night, you got a Mike's Hydrogen Weekapaug all over. Closing the first set, closing the second set, opening encores. And it's a solid version. I know that you're such a big proponent of the trio being together, but let me ask you, if you were around in this time and you saw 15 shows and saw 13 Mike's Hydrogen Weekapaugs, and then you went to a show and they did a Mike Simple, wouldn't you be like, this is fantastic?
At this time, yes, I think you definitely would be, because The only difference is like what's the jam in the middle of it like, right? Like they changed this up a little. Oh, the mics going into hydrogen was a little different. Oh, the hydrogen really expanded out this. So I totally get that. It's like at that time it was such a rehearsal, such a practice song. Like they felt so comfortable doing it because they did it all the time.
And it
So
never got on an album.
right, yeah. And I think closing the set with it, like Pog was such a happy tune and such a great way to get the crowd. We always talk about the closers and what you need going into like an intermission. Perfect song for that, especially back then, like where crowds were not quite sure what they were really into, and you're like, oh, I know this song because they play it all the time at every show. They just played it the last show. They played it 2 shows ago. I know this song. So then it made you feel good too, because you're like, I know this one. All these other people in here who this is their first time seeing them don't really know it yet. So I can like totally get down to this. And I know where like the hits are, the beats are, like that kind of thing. So,
and it has a line, and it has a line in it that works in a bar, that works in a theater, that works in the biggest place you can play, Sharing in the Groove. You get everybody singing that, and everybody's loose and they let go. They've freed themselves of whatever the external world has on them at that moment.
Totally. Trying to get a woman match your move, like, I mean, it works. It's like that fun get down. And like, and going into it, Mike's is such a great beginning heavy song. That's kind of that rocker that like, and like, yes. And then the Weekapaug transition is just like, this was like, this is like the help.
It was okay. Mike didn't figure that shit out till 97 when he got the bass intro.
But you still knew like that the 3-song segue, it was very much because if you were still a big Deadhead at this time and still following, this was their Help Slip Frank. This was their like feeling,
and it worked that way for you. Yes, definitely. Yeah, it was a nice entryway, and that's probably why they did it so much, because you went and saw them and said, "Oh, what was those? That song they did at the end? It sounded like it had 3 parts."
Right, exactly. And you're like, oh, the Mike's Hydrogen Pog. It's very Help Slip Frank. Like, I love that. Like,
I want that tape. Let me find a tape with that. Oh, every tape has that on it.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, oh shit. But see, Kev, to your point, like you said, like putting the sample in there, like the purist with Help Slip Frank. So when the Dead and Company show that I went to and getting the Franklins in the 2 spot and then getting the Help Slip later, I'm like, oh shit, what are they gonna do? Not having the Franklins to like dun, 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 like after it. And they drop into an eyes, and you're like, oh, okay, that works. That's perfect. Like, that's so fun. So having that different thing in there sometimes does work. And I think your point is correct at this time, like getting that simple.
It would be great. But now you want the original because maybe once a year it pops, twice a year.
And
or
what
they do with it. Stupid like at New Year's when they do Weekapaug for the encore.
How good hydrogen can be sometimes these days, and that drop into Pog out of hydrogen is just like the juice.
Do you think Trey doesn't like playing it? That it's too much thinking?
Too much thinking. I don't know. I don't know. I just think I think they like having fun and like being creative like they are, and like changing it up and doing the same thing over and over like they did back then has gotten old, right? Like it's like, let's change it up. Let's do something fun. But I'll never get sick of the hydrogen in a Pog. That is the juice that just fuels me. Like it's such a gorgeous transition and drop.
So you're okay with a mic split from the hydrogen as long as they resolve whatever song into a hydrogen and then the groove
into the Pog. Yeah, exactly. And also I'm very against standalone Pogs. I cannot stand a standalone Pog. It just makes no sense to me.
That's fun. I'm praying for you at Mondegreen.
Nah, we'll get a monster at Mondegreen. It'll probably be like a Mike's and then 4 songs and then hopefully a hydrogen Pog.
Maybe we get a whole Mike set.
I saw you say that before. That would be fun.
Yes, I'm big on it. There's so many songs out there. They could totally do it. Mike Simple could take up 40 minutes.
Could easily. Very much. I know.
You got to. All right. Here, pull that thing down and make sure tomorrow night at 9 Eastern, 6 Pacific, Liv will be back, and we got lots to talk about. Some singer pulled a Roger Daltrey. We're going to talk about that a little. Den Company. We've been digging into some stats, T and I, so we're going to take a look at what songs you're probably going to get if you see a 3-day run and what songs you probably aren't going to get. Thursday, are we doing Thursday?
Well, hey, we'll also talk a little Taper's Choice, I think, tomorrow night and talk about Jerry's alligator making an
Alligator, right?
appearance. Alligator showing up, and my new job as roadie, as you can see, I have Zach's Nord keyboard in my bedroom still, shipping gear with him. But we'll talk a lot about the show. It was a lot of fun. Alligator is insane, and actually, we're gonna have the Guitar Foundation founder on to talk about what he started and what he's doing with why he lets people play alligator eventually. Not tomorrow night, but we will get him on eventually. He was a great guy. Andy is his name. So tune in tomorrow night, though. It's going to be a lot of fun. We'll have a lot to talk about. It'll be good. And then Thursday, panels and frames. Yeah, I think we'll do it. I know Tim might be absentee. We might pull in a third if Harley's around and can join us. She might join us. Otherwise, Kevin and I'll break down a few things. There's a lot to talk about. Inside Out blew away the box office this weekend. And, yeah. So, and then Sunday.
Part 3, on Sunday of Lemon Wheel. And I guess you're probably maybe you'll get some new faces. You'll probably get some familiar faces because there's certain of us have been there. Eventually, you're going to get T's face because he did go to one of the festivals.
That's not until the 8th round, though.
First week in August. You're looking at first week in August.
First week in August. We'll get to me. So,
does the Oswego count? Maybe we'll talk about does the Oswego count as a festival tomorrow. All right, let's get into set 2. Oh, there we go. Oh my God. I tell you what, I'll take a communications breakdown. It was raw, it was punky, it was fun. You don't have to think much. I think the less thinking you have to do in a bar, the better you are.
I agree with that. And this is very much the garage band style to me. Like this was, let's do a cover of Zeppelin. This was before like they'd, settled in on Good Times, Bad Times, way before No Quarter came around, like as their Zeppelin songs. But it's funny to see that Zeppelin's always been in there, sort of like AC/DC, sort of like what we get at the end in the encore. There's certain songs, certain bands that you can tell they followed and enjoyed and loved covering. And I think this one is so fun because this is probably one that like they've played in the barn or in the garage or wherever and fucked around with. And we're like, let's fucking rock second set open.
Banging away. Yeah.
Yeah.
3 chords in the truth, baby. 3 chords in the truth.
So fun. I wish they did it. I wish they'd play it these days. Like just bust it out every now and then because it's such a rocker. It's such a fun song. And to your point, when you're in the bar, you're like, I know this song. Fuck yeah.
Open the second set. Everyone's rushing in from outside smoking in this alley. They're like, oh, yeah.
They're like, oh, shit, they're doing Zeppelin. Sweet. This is a rock band.
and then they throw some Caravan at you. Some Charlie Parker there.
Yeah.
I tell you what, I would much rather, if you're going to bust out this or A-Train, to bust this out because it's a little darker. It's a little more evil. It leans in a little more. And I think that it works in a bar situation. I don't know how well it works for a crowd to go from Zeppelin to that.
Yeah, it's a little right? Like you're kind of
but it's still got the dark edge. So once you hear it a little bit, you're like, I know this song. Oh, wait, wow, they're doing a kind of But
I wonder if it would work a little bit better later in the set or in a better position than in the 2 slot right after you're rocking out with communication.
Well, this set's janky. It's like they throw out a bunch of hits.
Yeah, but it gets very. I mean, the next few songs run is like what we had in the first set. Like it's very much their wheelhouse of PHiSH, like a Yam, the Coil, Antelope.
Because it's Yam. I guess my thing is Yam never worked really in a bar for me because it's the grand scale of.
But it's early PHiSH and it's early sounding and it's not. It hadn't like again. You're looking at it. It hasn't gotten its grand #1 title like tweezer type thing. Like it's not its song yet, right? It's like it's PHiSH, but it's PHiSH in this like smaller fishbowl, so to speak, right? They haven't moved into the aquarium or the ocean yet. Like they're just in this small bowl, and it works in that respect. Again, Vocal Jam I don't think works anywhere, but it really doesn't work in a bar. Like
did the Vocal Jam ever work?
No, that's what I mean. No, it never works for me. I know some people are cool with it, whatever, but it does not work for me. A couple years ago when they did the
Sure. Well, when you put on a You Enjoy Myself and it's like 26 minutes long, and at 19 minutes they go into the Vocal Jam, you're like, that's not fair.
No.
It's just
And it's always these days. I hate the way it goes in. Like it just sort of turns and it's like, and does this one didn't get too heavy into it. Like it kind of like, and a couple years ago, you know, when they were doing the jam with the music and then back into the music was awesome. Like I thought, okay, let's keep that going. But then they got rid of it, you know. But it's still good. I still love. It's still such a great song, and it's still so. I understand what you're saying because you're not really paying attention to it in a bar. You know, like you're a little bit more distracted. You're talking, you're like
I'm gonna
doing
take a
whatever.
piss, hit on the
So you're not
bartender.
really
You know.
into as beautiful as the song is and as well composed as it is in the bar. But I get them having to play it, and this is where the rawness and like learning it and playing it in these kind of venues leads to being able to play it better
Right.
in other places. So
This set to me is we want to play bigger places because Squirming Coil is it needs a huge piano. It
yeah.
deserves that, the grandeur of the song, and it's fun and it's quick. I mean, they don't, you know, they're like, hey, this is a newer song. Hey, check it out.
And it's got the speed to it a little bit too. Like it hadn't, the pace hadn't slowed
The tempo,
into
right?
the
Yeah.
tempo hadn't slowed into sort of the beautiful what it is and the jam that comes out of it and what it is. It's sort of in that garage band era PHiSH. It's sort of in that fast paced. We're not quite sure what this song is yet. It's newer. We're just kind of like fucking around with it, but here it is.
A little bit different than what we normally do.
Right. Here's the lump of clay. We haven't quite figured out what's going to come out of it yet, but here it is. So, right. But then you get an Antelope, which is
at this point is 5 years old, 4.5 years old, and it still sounds like it's falling apart.
Yep.
It sounds like they're not quite sure at one point. I don't know who it was or what was going on, but it sounded like they were playing two different versions of Antelope at the same time.
Yeah, kind of, right? Like it was sort of a messy, messy Antelope. Like it was almost like the clay had sort of formed, but then reformed and like become a new lump.
They were pushing it. They were totally. But I love Trey's guitar. I love Trey playing the dirty rhythm guitar for so much of it. He rips the solo. They push it a little bit. Like the band's ready to go back in at one point, and Trey's just like, wow, wow. He like stretches out the part before they drop into the Rye Rye Rocco for a good 90 seconds more.
Which is that's the experimental of it. Like I want to, like we're used to playing this song. Let's see what legs we can give it. Like what else can we do with it? What else can we fuck around with it, especially tonight in this bar? Like how can we expand it out or rock more with it or do something different with it, right? You know, and even if the rest of the band's not quite with me yet, we'll figure it out. Like this is just like sort of the experiment of like what we can do with it and where we can take it and what it can become. So interesting.
Do you think that they switched instruments? Because I'm pretty sure that Fishman never left the drums for Terrapin.
Yeah, I don't think he did. It sounded like he didn't.
No, hold your head up. No intro, outro. Like they just, you know, and maybe Trey was playing guitar and then you don't hear the guitar. So maybe Trey went over and jumped on and Fishman walked off.
Maybe, yeah. It could have been.
It wasn't a normal thing. And Terrapin, God, it's so fucking slow. The tempo
it's so slow.
I love they do a Sid Barrett tune. Good for you. They do a bunch of Sid Barrett tunes, and I wish you would do Love You if you're going to do a Sid Barrett tune.
It's such, again, the cover, the like, you know, breakdown Caravan Terrapin in the set. Like it's so not even like 1.0. It's like so 0.5. Like it's so great. It's so different in like what PHiSH was at that time doing these covers and like that kind of thing. So it was like, but yeah, to your point, it's so slow, especially after Antelope, right? Like it's such a weird spot for it to drop in. Like
it's the cool down tune,
the stop down tune, like really.
And then we get a primitive Divided Sky. Good for them. Around this time is when they were doing the Rhombus story. I caught one of them, and so I guess they were leaning into Divided Sky at this time.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, interesting closer too, you know, like we talked about in the first set. the way they closed the first set with what they knew and like rocking it out and doing that. Kind of an interesting way to close with the Divided Sky. Again, this song to me especially is an odd, like you mentioned it with Yem being in the bar. This one is a tough bar song for me too, because to me, Divided Sky needs the big, like the openness, the outdoors especially, but the openness, the like
Right.
the
You
arena
need the
feel.
sun setting. They need to
Yeah,
nail it at the exact right time where it's going over the trees, and you're like, oh, this is so perfect. Good for
and you
them.
get Trey with the extended, bang, the like you want that,
Uh,
and it in a
You
bar
see
it doesn't
people just
quite
melting, people
right.
just in love,
In the bar when he hits that sustained note, it doesn't quite have that same effect. You're just kind of like,
It's
what?
crying for the next level. This whole
Right.
set is
Yeah,
crying for the next level.
totally. Which is like what you could see where they could be, right? Like where they need to get to, where they need to break out into, type thing, and very much like that. And then
What's
this
your
is
2-year
especially
plan, guys?
right. And this was definitely, which is interesting to close the show with this song because it really puts an explanation point on we need to
Right.
be bigger.
And,
Like
and then they do the pay your tab tune.
my favorite. God, I wish they'd play this again.
Yeah, I
Oh,
wish we'd break that back out.
it's just so fun and so good and such a great cover. Like it's just so fun and I love it. And as an encore, perfect encore. Like
Yep.
if you're there at the bar and a perfect bar song, like we just talked about Divided Sky and Yem being these
You don't
odd.
got to stay here, but you
This
can't go.
is the perfect bar song. Like, you're like, yes, end of night. We got a communication breakdown to start the set and a Grange to close the show. Yes, like
Where's
fuck
the
yeah,
dive bar around the corner with the cool jukebox we're gonna
right,
go hang out at?
right, exactly. So good.
Oh
It's
man.
just
So how hard would it be for me to get you to open up your browser and do a spin?
and do a spin.
Because we did the
Spin
spin
around like-
without you last week. I think it's only fair to do the spin without Tim.
There we go. Yeah, I know. And I would have probably vetoed this show just because I was like 90. Like, oh, I hate like it's fun, but the rawness and the craziness of it, like I like a little bit more.
I like the context. I like being able to look back and think 5 years later they did this, or 7 years later they did this, and how far they came in that time.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, we got the bubbles up. Wait, let me fix that.
You got to take
where is it?
You got to take the brand off. Hi, how you doing?
There's all three of us. Where's the brand? How do you take the brand off?
You got to go over to brand, and then you got to take off recap spot 2. And now you can make us rectangles if you want.
There's the rectangle.
There we go. Now if you share, it should do the normal thing.
How do I bring it back up? Oh, well, there it is, full screen. I can't get it to. How do I get it? Hang on, let's try this again.
There
we go. Oh, I had it. Wait, I had it. Hang on. Yeah.
There it is.
Dun, dun, dun. See that? Look at us. We don't need no producer. We got this down.
All right, you get to pick the number.
I'm gonna do. I'll do 2. How about 2? All right. So we'll do 1. Let's see, 187. Woof.
We did. We added a second thing last time because it was Santana. It's up to you.
Okay, no, I get to do one more because that was just the first one. This is number 2.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say that might be.
Woo. There we go.
Oh, look at that! How appropriate!
A 3-setter. Oh yeah, limestone.
A great win. Oh, let's do it. That is huge.
That's funny. That's really funny.
Make Tim really dive in.
After he just did his whole thing. Yeah, that works. We can do that. That'll be fun.
All
3
right.
steps.
We have a winner.
Nice. Sweet. I'll take a screenshot of it so we have it. I can post it and Tim will know. Sweet. Sweet.
There we are. All right, everybody.
Boom.
Thanks.
Awesome, Kev. That was fun. That was a lot of fun. Thanks for joining. Thanks for listening.
Join the Discord. they're going to be talking about it over on the Discord.
That's right. Join the Discord. As SC said, the Dream Team was live and in effect today. Thanks for watching. Tomorrow night, tune in live for Live. And thanks, everybody. We'll see you later.
Like and subscribe. We love you.